Hello and welcome to the first episode of Stitch and Screen. If you don't know me, my name is Rajan, aka Not Half Bad Crochet, and if you enjoy crochet content like project vlogs, day in the lives, tutorials, then please consider subscribing to my channel. If you enjoy this video, give it a little like and leave me a comment to let me know what you think. So if you are familiar with my channel, you may have seen in some of my project vlogs, my monthly favorites, and in my crochet day vlogs, I love talking about TV and movies. It is something I have always enjoyed. I love yapping about it. I love talking to my friends about it. And in some of my vlogs and previous videos, I do talk a lot about what I'm watching. So I figured that I would start a new segment on my channel where I just talk about TV shows and movies whilst I work on some stitches. I will be weaving the ends on this asymmetrical t-shirt that I've been working on. I think it's turned out so fun. So I don't really have like any sort of structure to this kind of video. I have a couple of films I want to talk about. I have a couple of TV shows I want to talk about. I would obviously love to hear your opinions on any TV shows or movies that you guys have been watching, or any of the films and the shows that I'm mentioning as well. So to absolutely nobody's surprise, I really want to talk about Final Destination 6 or Final Destination Bloodlines. I watched this at the cinema probably a few days after it had come out and I had such a fun time. I personally rated this movie 5 stars. I pretty much have no notes for this movie. I had such a fun time watching it. It was honestly such a great addition to the franchise. I'm a really big fan of horror movies, and it's something that I didn't really realize I was a big fan of until I kind of realized how many horror movies I watch and how many I thoroughly enjoy. So if you don't know the premise to any of the Final Destination movies, it's basically a film franchise with now 6 movies. We follow a group of people who have gotten into a freak accident of some kind, and one of them ends up having a premonition where they see the events unfold and they see themselves die, their friends, their family, whoever else is in that group. They see everyone die in this like horrific freak accident. You have a plane crash, there's a motorway crash, there's a roller coaster malfunction, there's a bridge collapse, there's an accident at like a race car track, and all of these different scenarios, somebody has a premonition, they warn a group of people, and then that group of people kind of manage to escape. The baseline for the story is that death has a plan for everyone, and that the people who didn't die when they were supposed to die, death is essentially coming for them. And so they kind of get picked off one by one and end up having these freak accidents where death is reclaiming them and killing them. So it's a really interesting premise because there's no kind of like axe murderer, there's no boogeyman. It is literally just fate essentially. And in each movie you have the kind of main character who has the premonition, and you have the different groups of people. There are some really interesting, honestly quite comedic and unique ways that these characters are killed off in each movie, and I think that's one of the best things about each film, is that they have such iconic death scenes. So with Final Destination Bloodlines, the main difference is that the premonition scene, which is pretty much always at the start of every movie, this time it's actually like a flashback. So we are essentially going back in time to around like the 50s, and we see this horrible freak accident happen, and then we are transported back to current times. So we realize that the granddaughter of the person who had the premonition is having the premonition as a dream, and it's a recurring nightmare that this character is having. She's been having this recurring nightmare for ages, and she basically does some digging into her family and finds out that her grandma, who she's estranged with, is the person who she's been dreaming about, who has the premonition of this awful freak accident. And I gotta say, the opening scene was so good. The kind of premonition scene, which is always the kind of most iconic part of the movie, is basically a group of characters go up to something called the sky view, and it's one of those kind of big, huge, like, it's almost like, it looks a bit like the Space Needle. It's got this huge like viewing platform. It was in the 50s. They're told, oh, we managed to open a bit earlier because we finished building it earlier, which is not a good thing because that means safety checks were not completed. But our main character goes up there with her partner. Everyone's dancing. It's like the opening of the sky view. Everyone's having a good time, and then the floor breaks. The floor, which is glass breaks, it cracks somehow, people go falling through, then there's like a fire and an explosion. Obviously they're really high up, they're trying to go down the stairs, then something crashes into the stairs. It's crazy. It's so good, it's so fun, it's so entertaining. I will say that this movie in particular felt more like a horror comedy than any of the other films. I personally love a good horror comedy, and the reason why I think that is because of a particular character called Eric, and he was absolutely the comic relief of this film. He was funny, he was charming, he was just silly and goofy, didn't take himself too seriously, didn't take the whole kind of death is chasing us thing too seriously, and he was such a breath of fresh air in the movie and in the franchise, because some of them I think are a little bit more serious than others, and I think once they kind of really embraced the almost like cheesiness of the film, I think that really lent itself to Bloodlines being an excellent movie. Right, with all of the Final Destinations, you really have to just like suspend your disbelief. Like with so many of the death scenes, so many of the premonitions, so much of it is unrealistic. Like that's just not the way that things work, that's not the way people would die if they fell a certain way, whatever the scenario is. So you really do have to just kind of like switch your brain off, which I personally think is great. I love when I'm able to watch a movie that is just so crazy, but like in a fun way. If you're also a fan of the franchise, there are loads of references to the other movies. We hear characters from the other films, we hear about random deaths from the other films. It is honestly so fun, and I think the Final Destination franchise and being part of like the fandom, which I'm not really like super into, but being a fan of the franchise is really fun. Honestly, this movie really reminded me a lot of the classic noughties horror movies, and it's something that I have been begging to come back. I am like, please make more of this vibe, because back in the day when I was younger, I'm a millennial, I grew up with these movies, I grew up with Final Destination, and the first two really fucking traumatized me. I was far too young to be watching them. I think I watched the first movie like a couple of years after it came out, so I was probably about 10 or 11, and I should absolutely not have been watching those films, but I loved them. Like I said, I love horror movies and I thoroughly enjoyed these films. But the way that Bloodlines was done felt so reminiscent of the kind of 2000s era of when these films first came out, and I love that it held onto that vibe and that kind of classics way of storytelling, no matter whether people deem it cheesy or it's not popular, whatever. I think it's just fun, and I honestly think that horror movies should be made fun again. And don't get me wrong, I feel like the more nuanced horror movies that have been coming out as of recent are great. They have their place 100%, but I love nothing more than a cheesy little horror movie that is just silly and goofy and fun. Something that reminds me of a movie that I would have watched at a sleepover with friends. Something that has jump scares and that is silly and that doesn't take itself too seriously and has ridiculous death scenes and cliche characters. I love it, and I'm like, please, I need more. One thing for me that I've kind of stopped doing recently is that I don't watch the trailers for movies anymore, and I did end up watching I believe it was like a teaser trailer of Final Destination Bloodlines, because it was essentially like a death scene. And if you saw the trailer, the death scene was basically a character who gets who's in like a tattoo shop, a piercing shop. In typical Final Destination fashion, all of these little sequence of events happens where he basically ends up with a kind of clip around his septum ring that's attached to a fan that is kind of slowly pulling him off of the ground, and then something catches on fire and everything's breaking and there's music playing, and it's just, yeah, it's crazy. And that was the trailer. I was really upset to see that character was in the movie. That character is Eric. But what I loved was that the trailer did not ruin that scene. And when I saw the scene kind of start to play out in the movie, I was kind of like, oh, okay, I've seen this, you know, I saw it in the trailer, which for me was quite disappointing, because I don't want to be watching something I've already seen in a movie that I've never seen before, you know? So I was a bit like, oh, okay, that's a bit of a shame that we've already seen it, but whatever. But it turns out that that was not the scene where Eric died. And I thought that was perfect. I was like, great. I love when a trailer is exactly that, a trailer. It's not showing me the whole fucking film. It's not giving me spoilers. It's not sharing too much information. It's just giving me enough to want to watch the movie, but not too much that I see all the best bits in the trailer. I also want to shout out Tony Todd, who is, if you don't know who he is the OG Candyman. He has been in so many horror movies. He is honestly such an incredible actor, and I think he is such a nostalgic actor as well. He was basically in the first few Final Destination movies as kind of like the person who told everyone what the hell was happening. And he was creepy, he was unnerving, he was dark and mysterious. He played the part so incredibly well. And if you don't know, Tony Todd passed away, I think in 2024, so very, very recently. And he did end up being in the movie, which I was unsure if he would have been, because I didn't know obviously when they filmed Bloodlines, but he was in the movie, which was such a amazing moment to have witnessed. And I think if you've watched the movie, you kind of know that that scene with him, he kind of talks, it's almost like he talks about death. It's like he is saying his final goodbye, which was a genuinely beautiful part of the film. And I'm almost glad that he got to have that moment to not only say goodbye to the franchise, which he has been in for 20 odd years, also in a way say goodbye to his audience and to anyone who has ever loved him, anyone who has ever watched him in a movie and enjoyed his performance. He is honestly such a horror icon, and I would absolutely urge you to watch any movie that he's been in. My final point that I want to talk about with Final Destination Bloodlines is I am very confused as to what race everyone was in the main family. So the main character who plays Stephanie, she is very clearly Latinx, and in the movie her mum is a white person, seemingly fully white, and then her father is East Asian. So I was a little bit confused, and honestly I was expecting for there to be like a plot twist further down the line to say that she's not actually a blood relative because she was adopted or something, because I was like, how do you get an East Asian man and a white person and you give birth to a Latinx person? And I get that people can look very different depending on the race, depending on who their parents are, blah blah blah, but this just seemed a bit silly. And I know I'm questioning it about Final Destination of all movies, but it is something that I've been seeing a lot more recently, where they're not really kind of like pairing the correct parents with the correct race of characters in a lot of situations. Because as well, her brother, who is East Asian, he's Filipino and he looks Filipino, and I don't know where in East Asia the father's actor is from, but I was like, they are absolutely not from the same country because of the way they look. It's just very clear, it's very evident. So I was expecting a kind of plot twist of sorts because of that, and I didn't get it, and I'm still baffled as to how did that baby get made? How is this possible? Hey, as long as they're getting the roles, okay? I'm kind of confused because I'm like, I don't really see many other people talking about it, and am I the only one who's confused? I don't know. Anyway, that's kind of all I have to say about Final Destination Bloodlines. If you haven't watched it, I would absolutely recommend watching it. It's such a fun movie. I did basically a huge rewatch of all of the previous movies before I watched Bloodlines, and it was such a great time. And also from the release of the movie, I've seen a bunch of people talk about different premonition scenes that they would like to see, and I think a fibre arts version would be so fucking fun. Can you imagine, like, so here's the scene. I'm gonna set the scene for you. We are at a fibre show, you know, where they have like livestock of sheep and different llamas, and they have yarn dyers, they have fashion, like they have like the catwalks where people are showing the things that they've created, they have like workshops and classes, that sort of show or festival of some kind, just all things fibre arts. You have the knitting needles everywhere, crochet hooks, you have all of the yarn, you have people like dyeing the yarn, you have people doing spinning the yarn, all of that stuff at a fibre festival. And the situation is all hell breaks fucking loose. A bunch of weird Final Destination-y type things happen, and somehow the sheep and the llamas have escaped, and there's like a stampede of sheep and llamas, and people get stampeded, and that's how a bunch of people die. And then there's people falling, but there's like crochet hooks everywhere, and there's knitting needles everywhere, so people are getting impaled on these crochet hooks and these knitting needles. And then, you know, those big drums, I think they're called like carding drums or something along those lines, those big drums, somebody's like gotten their hair stuck into one of them, and then they can't get out because there's so much commotion, so then they end up getting like killed in the carding drum. And there's like a spinning wheel where, I don't know, somebody's shoelace gets caught in it and then they get trapped and die somehow. I just think that would be so fun. It would be so silly, so ridiculous, and I can believe it, to be honest. Sorry if that's freaked you out. And like I said, with Final Destination, you absolutely have to suspend your disbelief, because Could a sheep stampede on people? Maybe. Who knows? Are they known for stampedes? Probably not. Could somebody impale themselves on knitting needles? Probably. Maybe. Is it likely? No. So I do think a Fibre Arts Final Destination premonition scene would be so fucking fun. The next movie I want to talk about is Snow White. And before I get into it, I have nothing good to say about this film. Just FYI, if you feel very strongly about Snow White, in particular the new 2025 movie, maybe skip this part. Because like I said, I have nothing but bad words to say about this movie. I also just want to preface this by saying, okay, how much can I actually say on YouTube? I did not contribute financially to watching this movie, mainly because of a particular actor who is in the film whose views I do not support. The main character, Snow White, who is played by Rachel Zegler, her thoughts and feelings are what I agree with. The evil witch, her thoughts and feelings, I do not agree with. Like I said, I don't know how much I can say on YouTube. I obviously don't want this video to get taken down. For that reason, I was like, I'm not going to contribute any money to this movie. And I'm sorry to Rachel Zegler, who had to bear the brunt of that, because I think that was a very big part as to why this film's success was so terrible. Box office wise, at least. For the actual movie, it was trash. I'm sorry, it was just trash. It was not good. It was not good at all, okay? I think the only saving grace was that Rachel Zegler can sing. That girl has got a voice on her and she is incredibly talented. She's very, very good in a lot of stuff I've seen her in. I don't think I've ever really seen her in anything where she's been bad. I think the costuming was terrible. Obviously, I understand that they were trying to kind of keep true to the source material and make sure she still looks like Snow White, kind of in her very classic blue and yellow dress, but it just looked fucking awful. I think the costume design was terrible. I think the evil queen's costume design, also terrible. It just looked very kind of cheap and very tacky, but like not in like a purposely done fun and almost like campy way. It was just done in like a hot glue gun drag queen on RuPaul's Drag Race who doesn't know how to sew and has put a bunch of stuff together type of way. And it honestly was quite a distracting element to the film because it was just so bad. The costumes were just so bad, in my opinion. I also really hated the bob that they gave Rachel Zegler. I don't know if it was because of the bob itself or because of the fact that I don't think she really suited it, or maybe it was like I don't really think she suited that haircut. I'm not really sure what it was specifically, but there was just something that didn't look right, whether it was the cut itself or like the wig itself, or if it was that cut on her that I was like, something just doesn't look right. And again, it was very distracting. I also really hated the fact that all of the 7 dwarfs were CGI. I think that's an extremely interesting and odd choice to make. I don't have enough knowledge really on the opinion or the general consensus from little people on whether they appreciated that, whether they agree with it, what their thoughts and feelings are. I personally thought it was a very weird choice to make. I didn't know that they were going to be CGI until I actually watched the film. So that was like quite a terrible surprise for me whilst watching the movie, because I was like, what the hell is going on? It just looks really weird. It looks really fake, obviously, because it was CGI. And I just feel like it was completely unnecessary, you know? And you're kind of like, I feel like you could have tried a bit harder. I also think that the new songs that were added were not that great. And like I said, if it wasn't for Rachel Zegler being a good singer, I think the songs would have been a lot worse. I also think the evil queen, the actress, could not sing. That also was extremely distracting. So it was a bad song with a bad singer. And honestly, you can't really polish a turd, let's be real. It genuinely got to a point where I started skipping through the songs because the songs were bad, singing was terrible, and I feel like the songs just were so long. I don't know if it was because I very clearly obviously disliked them. I genuinely was like so bored by the majority of this film, and I also feel like there was songs every 5 seconds. So it was either a reprise of a song or it was a completely new one, and I was like, we don't need to hear this again. It was bad the first time, okay? The love interest, I don't know much about him as an actor. I don't think I've ever seen him in anything else. He honestly just reminded me of every white guy I've ever seen in Clapham. I think he was completely nondescript. I don't really know if that's what they were going for. I can't say he was, you know, took the role and did something amazing with it, because like, again, you can't really polish a turd. I mean, he was fine. He was acceptable. I don't think his character with Snow White's character had the best chemistry. I don't know. I did not enjoy this movie, as I'm sure you can probably tell. And there was just not really any redeeming features to it. And I honestly feel quite bad for like Rachel Zegler, because you can see that she was really excited about it. The way she kind of talked about it on her press tours, the way she talked about it on interviews, she was really excited to kind of see this version of Snow White. And don't get me wrong, it was definitely a better version of Snow White as a character than the original, which was released in like 1937 or something. And as much as like I'm here for the, you know, the feminism of it and the fact that she's like a bad bitch who don't need no man, that's great, but it was not a redeeming enough story edit to redeem the entire movie, which was not good in my opinion. I also personally don't really have much of a kind of like nostalgic connection to the original Snow White. I think Snow White as a princess is probably, her and Cinderella are probably the characters that I kind of least bonded with in that sense as a child, as I was watching these, you know, growing up. Those two characters I did not give a shit about. So I think the fact that I'm watching a remake of it as well, I'm kind of like, I'm not bothered, you know. But yeah, those are my thoughts for the new Snow White, and I'm sorry if you disagree, because I've just shat all over a film that you enjoy, but it was just not for me. And I can appreciate that there are probably people out there who will enjoy this movie, and that is okay. We are all allowed to have different opinions, but for me personally, it's a no. Okay, moving on to TV shows. I want to talk about an anime that I caught up with very recently, called Campfire Cooking in Another World with My Absurd Skill. I'm pretty sure that's the title. If I've got it wrong, I will put it up here somewhere, but it's a long title, okay? Honestly, whoever names these animes and these mangas deserves an award, because some of them are so ridiculous, some of them are so long, and some of them I'm just like, oh, actually, fair enough, because you basically told me exactly what I'm getting myself in for. Like, it's very literal, which is something I appreciate. So this anime at the moment has just one season as far as I can remember, and it is basically about our main character, who is just like a normal everyday dude. He's just a normal guy, and he basically gets transported into this other world. And when he arrives at this other world, there are other people who've been transported there, and they're being scanned to check what their special skill is. Some of them have got like super strength, some of them have got healing, and when he gets scanned, his is instant shopping or something along those lines. And so he's like, okay, I'm a loser then, because all of these other people have got these really cool skills and mine is just like online shopping. And the reason why they've kind of been summoned there is because there's this like war going on and they need help, and so the people who are like recruiting them or who brought them there are like, you can go because we don't need you, your power is essentially useless, it's fine. So he kind of goes along his way, and he's on this kind of quest to get back home and basically figure out what the fuck to do, because he's just been plonked there. And we basically follow his journey. He meets a bunch of different people, a bunch of different kind of magical fairy tale-esque creatures along the way. He becomes friends with a few of them. He kind of learns how their currency works. He learns like what's dangerous, what's not dangerous. He picks up some magic here and there, and he kind of hones on his skills a little bit. And it sounds absolutely nuts. It kind of is, but like in the best way possible. It is such a wholesome and fun, easy watch. Like, it's the perfect background show to watch whilst you're crocheting or knitting or doing your fibre arts. It is such a fun, simple show, but it is so engaging. The actual anime art itself is absolutely beautiful. The characters are really fun, and the characters just feel very normal considering you're in this like crazy world of all of these different creatures and stuff. They feel very relatable in a sense. There's also obviously like an element of cooking on it as well, because he ends up cooking for everyone he's with, and so he basically will like order the food or order the ingredients or whatever from his like, you know, online shop that like lives in his brain, and then it gets instantly delivered. So he basically has like fucking Amazon Prime inside of him, and he ends up cooking all of the meals, and he will essentially give you the recipe of what he's cooking. He'll cook, I don't know, teriyaki salmon, and he'll say how to marinate it, how to cook it, what sauces to use, how to serve it up, how to tell when it's cooked, that sort of thing. And it's really fun. And if you know anything about anime food, it looks delicious always. It looks so fucking good. And it got to a point where I couldn't watch that show without eating something along the way, because everything looks so fucking tasty. That is my top tip. Don't watch it on an empty stomach. watch it whilst you're eating. It will be so much better. It's like when you watch Great British Bake Off and you don't have a sweet treat and it is extremely sad. You kind of have to watch Great British Bake Off with a sweet treat of some kind. But I absolutely loved it. I watched the entire first season. I believe that there is a second season coming out relatively soon, but it's such a fun, easygoing kind of show. If you want to watch something that's really low stakes, almost like a background show, but is engaging enough and has enough of a fleshed out storyline that you can keep engaged with at the same time, this is the perfect show. And we have come to the end of the first episode of Stitch and Screen. I managed to weave in a bunch of ends and yapped about some movies and TV shows that I've been really enjoying. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a little like and leave me a comment. Also, let me know what you guys are watching. I am always up for taking recommendations on films and TV shows that you enjoy. There is a very high chance I may have already watched them because I do watch a lot of TV shows and movies. But hey, I'd love to chat about them. If you've watched any of the movies or the TV shows that I have mentioned today, let me know. Tell me your thoughts. And of course, if you enjoy crochet content like this, like project vlogs, day in the lives, tutorials, then please consider subscribing to my channel. I would love to connect with you guys. If you're not following me already on TikTok and Instagram, my @s are in the description, but you can find me at Not Half Bad Crochet. Thanks so much for hanging out, and I will hopefully see you in the next video.